Here's what makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Student loan debt is the only debt that in 99.999999% of the cases cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. The federal loan debt that you can incur for the Stafford loans usually does not pay for the cost of a university education, so you end up doing what? Getting private student loan debts from banks. Banks aren't regulated like the federal government, where the maximum interest rate on a Stafford loan is 6.8%. On a PLUS loan, you're looking at 7.98%. Bank loans have the ability to go to 15, 18, 19%. And the United States government bankruptcy laws protect those banks. So the banks can screw you with the interest rates that they are charging you, and you do not have any rights whatsoever to say, I cannot afford this. Then the system allows you to defer your student loans, to do forbearance on your student loans. What does that mean? It simply means that you don't have to pay it right away, but the interest continues to accumulate. Now, listen to me closely here. There's not a lot of safe places to make money on your money today. And they know that. And many of these banks and institutions, they borrow at 0% and they're lending to you at 6.8 or 8%. And when you don't pay it back, they are thrilled. They are thrilled because it starts to compound and compound and compound, and 40,000 turns into 80,000, turns into 150,000, and then you think you've been getting away with something because you haven't been able to pay it, and then they contact you and you have got to pay back that $150,000. You can't. What do? They will garnish your wages. Even if you're old enough when this happens, they will garnish your Social Security check. Wow. So when you are taking out student loans, parents out there, when you are co-signing a private student loan, you better be very, very careful, especially because some of the private student loans state that if the person you co-sign for dies, they don't care. You are stuck paying that student loan for as long as it's going to take, even if the student is no longer here. So all the rights are going to the institution. So you better think twice before you think an expensive education is what's going to get you a job when there are no jobs out there to be gotten.
So student loans, man, these are like, it's nasty work, man. I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is because somebody asked me the other day that they were thinking about transferring their, career and, like starting in design and getting into filmmaking and all of that stuff. And the very first thing that they said that they, typically get advice about is that they need to go to school. They either need to go to film school or they need to like enroll in some type of creative institution. And a lot of this stuff is not cheap. I mean, if you got the money, if you have the bread to, do it, then do it. Like if you have scholarships or anything like that, then absolutely worth it if you got the time. But if you are paying out of pocket, and you get a standard, loan or student loan or whatever, everything that this woman said, this video is like 10 years old or whatever, but everything that she said is like, that would scare the hell out of me or whatever, especially being in the fact that, like, again, this is not about, should you go to film school or should you go to art school or anything like that. Just more so be cognizant of if the juice is worth the squeeze. Can you see on the other side of the fence when you get out what your plan is, what your odds are and all of that stuff? That's the only advice that I give to people. I don't tell them they should or should not go to, any type of creative school or institution like SCAD or, the Art Institute or film school or anything like that. But God damn, man, like the amount of debt that you incur versus the actual salary that you may or may not get, these days, to me isn't worth it. But that's just my thought. On average, film school and, creative institutions are what, like anywhere from 250 grand to 300, grand, something like that on average for like a decent, spot. So, when you add the interest that she's talking about onto all of that, I don't really see how you ever get out of that. And the part about if something happens to you and you die and you have a cosigner and the debt still lives on and it just gets passed on to the next person, you can't file for bankruptcy, neither can they. That definitely is done by design. That just seems like, a punishment. And the flip side is definitely understandable. Like, the price of admission to a lot of companies is that they want you to have a degree. Now, when it comes to filmmaking, like a film degree is not really worth much in Hollywood. Pretty much people go there for the connections and all of that stuff with the alumni. In the creative space, it's maybe a little bit different depending on your training, but I've worked at small ad agencies and creative agencies, and I've worked at large ones, which I'm at now, and that never really there hasn't really been any creative institutions that I've seen that sort of tops the actual work. Like, I always look at the portfolio and the body of work that they have. Like, that's what attracts me. Really I'm not going to say I don't care about what type of education that they had or training or whatever, but in the creative world, like, I'm going by what I can see. And then when I talk to the person, how they can sort of communicate, how they solve creative problems and those types of things. And then through conversation and just getting a sense if they really know their stuff or not. And then it's sort of like the credentials and everything that's on the actual resume for me comes secondary or whatever, just because we're in a visual space. Let me know what you think. I just think student loans in general, the way they're set up is just nasty work. Peace.